Hello, everyone. It is Jeff Rich here from the Burning Archive. Welcome to the World of Flame. Lots of hot spots in the world right now. Let's have a bit of a dive into them with some quality history. And I'm really pleased you can join me on this discussion. Last week, I think I was talking about Nepal and France, and both of those events seem to have drifted a little bit into the background, although there has been a lot of argument about what exactly has been going on with them over the last week or so, what really happened in Nepal, and, why exactly did France not entirely collapse when after the events last week, everyone was talking about France being on the verge of collapse and all that sort of thing. It doesn't really seem to have happened. I'm going to check back on both of those countries today, but not so much to go into a big deep dive into the issues there so much as just reflect perhaps on how people have been thinking about it or not thinking so clearly about it. And what it means to actually have good political judgment in the midst of a crisis when suddenly a big event explodes. You'll always see commentary about, things collapsing and attributions of the causes of the events, all that sort of thing. But often after a week or two, a lot of that commentary has been forgotten or has demonstrably been shown to be not really on the mark. Events seem to unfold in a different way. What is it to actually have good political judgment, and how can history help you? That's kind of what I'm going to reflect on today. But I'm also sort of going to take a little pause and share with you some reflections on the work I've been doing over at jeffrich.substack.com. There you go, at jeffrich.substack.com, and my world history tour, where I've been looking at India, China, and the United States, and I've just started a bit of a look at Europe, looking at how history sheds a new perspective on understanding these world powers today. So do say hi if you're online, and do leave me some comments if you're joining in the replay. I'd love to hear from you all. Okay, so what else did I want to mention? I think I've given you a quick outline of all the key things that I really wanted to mention today, talking about Nepal, France, talking about good political judgment, and giving you a bit of a sense of what's been going on in my world history tour, because I have been putting out some great material there, which I'm really keen to share with you. Now, political judgment, what is that? It is a big question, and it is a question that this fellow here, I might just do it like this. This fellow here, Isaiah Berlin, one of the more famous political philosophers, political writers, you could say historians of ideas of the 20th century. Isaiah Berlin wrote in an essay near the end of his life, actually in 1996, he wrote an essay called On Political Judgment. And I'll just highlight it here for you to see. And the first, paragraph or two in that essay reads, what is it to have good judgment in politics? What is it to be politically wise or gifted, to be a political genius, or even to be no more than politically competent, to know how to get things done? Perhaps one way of looking for the answer is by considering what we are saying when we denounce statesmen or pity them for not possessing these qualities. We sometimes complain that they are blinded by prejudice or passion, but blinded to what? It is a conundrum. And he was really asking this question, I guess in the 1990s, when there was more than enough complaints about idiocy of politicians. It's only escalated since then. When you think about how people think about Emmanuel Macron, he is very much seen as a person who, for whatever reason, does not seem to have political genius, does not seem to have the ability to get things done, however smart he is, and there's no doubt about his basic intelligence. He helped write a very famous book in the philosophy of history by Paul Ricoeur. But it is a real question, and it doesn't just apply to political leaders. It also applies to people commenting on politics. What is it? What is it that we're looking for when we think someone has put their finger on an issue, that they've really understood what's going on in a crisis situation, that they've shown us what the underlying drivers of the event are, but also perhaps how events might lead? There are plenty of people with theories about what's been going on or what's happened, or how World War III is about to start, or everything's about to collapse. But all these theories, although they attract attention, all these theories, although they attract attention, they end up not really, they're getting their clickbaits and all that sort of stuff, but they don't really end up being a particularly helpful guide to the actual political events. So looking out for what exactly this quality is of political judgment isn't just something to think about for political leaders. It's also something to look for when you're sort of interpreting the news, interpreting how people are interpreting the news. And I think it's something that has been a little bit in short supply recently, because there have been so many big and confusing events. But just on Isaiah Berlin, I should also say his essay on political judgment, if you did want to not only read it, but to listen to it, I recorded a audio reading of Isaiah Berlin's on political judgment. That's available at my Substack at jeffrich.substack.com, which you can join there, and all my paid subscribers have access to that. And as I say there, this essay was this question we're all wrestling with. What is this skill that Western leaders seem to have lost contact with reality? But not just Western leaders, a lot of Western political commentators as well, both in the mainstream and the alternative media. What exactly is it that is the essential skill of political judgment? And that's, I guess, what is fascinating. And, to give you a little bit of without being too much of a spoiler alert, basically, Isaiah Berlin says the thing you really need is a little bit of quality history, if you like. You really need to have that sense of not just how does this case fit into a general theory? How is this case or this situation exactly the same as all the other situations that you might compare it to? But it's important, especially if you actually want to act within these events, to be able to really work out what is the particular thing about this particular chain of events and this particular set of individuals who are caught up in this chain of events, this particular set of circumstances. History is always an eccentric thing. It doesn't ever really fit a model, fit a theory. And Isaiah Berlin basically argues that the quality on political judgment, which is often something which can be displayed by people who sometimes don't seem to have that much book intelligence or that much business nous or that much fluency in terms of intellectual argument. They can't make an argument about political theories, but they're incredibly good at having a sort of a nose for what exactly is going on in this event and how exactly one should act in a series of, complex, chaotic, conflicting sets of information, how exactly to sort of navigate your way through a crisis. And I think we actually see this also in the case of events in Nepal and France, which I did talk about a little bit last week on the live, and not just in how these events have been navigated. I mean, what was the political skill of Emmanuel Macron, Francois Bayrou, or the new Prime Minister of France, Sébastien Lecornu, display more of this kind of political judgment, of being able to get things done despite all the resistance and all the difficulties and all the different clashes of expectations? Will he be able to display more political judgment than ever, perhaps Emmanuel Macron or Francois Bayrou or any other of the previous set of prime ministers? Or will he again flop? Still too early to say, but there's some interesting signs that I will talk about in a second. And also, Nepal, what exactly was the problem with the Nepalese leaders that this situation imploded in the way that it did? Now, there have been a lot of theories that there has been, foreign interference, that it was a colour revolution. And I don't really want to go into the detail of the arguments for or against that, so much as say that that one of the things I've been looking for in trying to work my way through all the different commentary this week over what exactly happened in Nepal has been who has been displaying that kind of political judgment that Isaiah Berlin talks about, who has been looking at the particulars of events rather than just applying theories, just saying, well, I was right about this in a previous occasion, I'm going to be right about it on this occasion, or a general in principle argument that this could only happen if a certain sort of things happen, or you only really need to know this about this situation. I've been trying to assess the quality of the judgment of the different commentators on these events, and I've actually got a recommendation for viewers to check out a really insightful discussion of events in Nepal in a second, which I will come to. But I did first want to comment on somewhat internet flame war, I guess, between two reasonably prominent alternative media commentators on geopolitics. Arnaud Bertrand, who's a French writer, commentator on geopolitics. I think he's a sort of entrepreneur who's become involved in geopolitics commentary. And Brian Beletic, the quite well-known Brian Beletic from the New Atlas YouTube channel. And you'll see here they've been exchanging, I won't go into all the detail of it, but they have been exchanging quite angry tweets or X messages on the whole question of the what exactly happened in Nepal. There's been a lot of heat. I don't know if there's been all that much light from either individual. Both have been expressing strong theories about things, And I don't want to get into individual commentaries on their arguments, but in my assessment of the various commentary that has been put out there, I don't think either Brian or Bertrand Arnaud Bertrand are really the best and most insightful commentators, the ones that are displaying that judgment about understanding the particulars of these particular people, these particular circumstances, these particular chain of events and pressures and conflicts in any kind of political situation. I've been working my way through a lot of the both international but particularly Indian media around this event, and heard many commentaries, very well-informed commentaries from former ambassadors to Nepal from India and other very well-sourced people. India, of course, has some very close cultural people-to-people ties with Nepal. And so, in general, I would recommend people focus their attention on some of the Indian media commentary on this issue. It's certainly, I think, a very, very well-placed, well-sourced, close to the ground, and less caught up in some of the Western, both mainstream and alternative media narrative commentary about the events in Nepal, and a really good discussion. And in the media, in that media, there has been a lot of the discussion of the issue that has been at play between Arnaud Bertrand and Brian Letic. Were the events in Nepal obviously a colour revolution? Was it obviously a US engineered regime change operation? And I guess the conclusion I've come to is it was not obviously anything. It was a pretty complicated affair, and it does pay to look at specific issues. In fact, I shared, I think, even on X, although at times I do think I'm going to abandon my X account, and watching the rather dismaying set of messages exchanged between Brian and his opponents and his supporters over this whole Nepal issue has only encouraged me to abandon my X account. But I did comment on my Substack notes account, and if you aren't already a user of notes on Substack, I really do recommend you head over and join Substack. You can join my Substack both as a free or a paid subscriber, or as a follower just on Notes. If you want, you can sort of follow me on Notes on Substack if you're interested in just sort of casual connection in that way. Notes basically works a bit like X, really. It's really a Twitter clone, I guess. But I did share this post with a recommended source of advice and analysis of the Nepal situation on my Substack account, where I said, what happened in Nepal? I'm unconvinced by the theories put forward by internet geopolitics experts, who I will not name since their arguments have careened into personal abuse. Of course, I've named at least some of them so far, and there are more people who are exchanging a lot of vitriol over this issue in inverse proportion to their personal stake in the issue. But the discussion, however, by Mahindra Lama in the YouTube video that I'm sharing there, which I think is probably also a podcast, is outstanding and subtle. He is an eminent expert who has advised Indian and Nepali governments, and he was an eyewitness to the events in Kathmandu. Made a bit of a grammatical error there. And you can watch this talk. I think it's actually just like an audio talk, so they've just got audio with the pictures there. From memory, I was listening to it while out on a walk, so I might be wrong about that, but you can certainly listen to this talk on YouTube at The Wire, which is an Indian periodical news outlet, which has which you can easily check out. I think it's thewire.in. And it says the violence in Nepal was very well planned. I won't go into all the detail of what Mahendra Lama has to say about the events in Nepal, but he does make some exceptionally astute observations, and he himself has been I think he's in like an eminent expert group that has advised both the prime ministers of Nepal and India. He himself speaks Nepalese or Nepali, and what's more, he was actually in Nepal, in Kathmandu, in the weeks before and during the I guess the riots, and hence the subsequent overthrow of the government in Nepal. So he makes some very interesting observations, both about the local context and local political circumstances and social circumstances that drove the protests, as well as perhaps some of the opportunistic elements that became attached to the protests. And he makes some extremely specific and particular comments about how exactly events unfolded, the particular buildings that were burnt, the particular individuals who were freed from prison, and other sorts of events that shed light on these events that I simply have not heard anywhere else. He's obviously, if he's been an expert advisor, eminent expert advisor to both the prime ministers of Nepal and India, he's a serious person with serious insights to both societies. He's not just commenting on the basis of what he's read on the internet or on this, the State Department website or anything like that. He's actually doing it based on understanding of the individuals involved, the parties involved, both the political parties involved, but also all the different social groups and interests involved as well. So I really do recommend people check that out. His basic conclusion is that there was absolutely genuine. It's neither a purely genuine, spontaneous event nor an engineered colour revolution. But he certainly also says that the nature of the events, nature of the violence, simply it cannot be explained by social protest alone, that there was a very carefully planned nature of the event, and the sort of particular actions taken by the protesters, not so much initially as in the day after the shooting of 19 people by the state police or the state authorities, and that there was almost certainly some kind of outside actors who he doesn't name, and he's quite cautious about that, involved in some way. But who exactly he had in mind, I'm not entirely sure. But I really do recommend everyone have a listen to Mahendra Lama's discussion of this issue. Let me just show it to you one more time. Mahendra Lama, you can see him in the bottom right there, and his discussion on YouTube, the violence in Nepal was very well planned. And it is, I think, one of the best discussions of the issue. Of course, there will be argument about exactly what happened, and there will be increasing evidence about exactly what happened emerging over over the next little while. I should say also, of course, that since I can't quite remember what the situation was when I gave my live stream last week, but the discussion, the new Prime Minister of Nepal, Sushila Kaki, former Chief Justice, and there is a genuine sense in which he's quite a capable person. There's also been some really interesting discussions, I think, on Ganesh Shot and P-Gurus and a few of the other Indian media channels as well, about contrasts between what happened in Nepal and, say, what happened in Bangladesh a year or so ago. So I think it's a continuing story, which I may well come back to. I think it's probably good for people to seek out those quality, well-grounded, good judgment sources of information, rather than simply rely on, mainstays of your commentary on other issues who are perhaps overly invested in particular theories about what happened without really trying to investigate what the specific and local circumstances about what happened in Nepal was. So that's what I wanted to say about Nepal. I also wanted to sort of go back to the situation in France. Of course, last week, last week, the French government collapsed. I discussed this a bit on my live stream, but also with Jamal Thomas on his show. Dramatic events. There was a lot of talk about France really collapsing and being in dire straits and all that sort of thing. And it was on the eve of some September 10 protests, block everything protests, where it wasn't entirely clear where those protests would go. As it happened, September 9, the evening of September 9, Emmanuel Macron announced his new Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, who has been a loyalist, former defence minister, and, involved in all of Macron's government so far. Generally, I think seen as a reasonably conservative person, but certainly someone quite close to Macron. And he has been charged or given the task of developing a consensus around a budget, the issue that former Prime Minister Francois Bayrou was unable to achieve. And Le Monde is reporting today, I think, September 17, that Lecornu is hinting at change but struggling to convince. And there have been a couple of concessions he has already made in the nature of the budget that he is proposing. In particular, the budget that was put forward by the previous Prime Minister, Francois Bayrou, he France sorry, Marco here is just saying France needs /NED lol. Yes. So the cause, I guess, of the collapse of the French government was the fact that previous Prime Minister Bayrou was unable to pass an austerity budget, which included $44 billion of cuts and included a range of savings measures, some of which there was some controversy over, some of which were pretty, I don't want to sound like too much of a cynical bureaucrat, but pretty standard sort of kind of savings measures that you see in budget savings measures, changes to tax brackets, changes to social welfare brackets, that sort of thing. Pension indexation, etc. But there were also some controversial things, one of which was to eliminate 2 public holidays, one of which was actually, I don't know how widely reported this was, one of which was the May 8th, I think, holiday commemorating the end of World War II in Europe. And it is reported by Le Monde that, in fact, it was Emmanuel Macron who initially suggested the additional the cuts to public holidays to boost productivity, increase taxation, and hence save some money off the government budget. And he did so as a sort of exchange for increases in defence measures. So Le Cornu does seem to be making some, conciliatory measures. He's apparently withdrawn the proposal to cut public holidays, withdrawn the proposal to cut some health centres, and has made a commitment to do some broader public debate. But interestingly, there is also now a very big debate going on within France. Pardon me, just getting a little bit brain fried there. Just give me a little sec to have a little bit of a drink. There is a big debate now in France, which you can see here, about what's called the Zucman tax, and some suggestions that the new government of Le Cornu in France, who really in many ways has a choice. I think I was describing last week that there's a sort of a 3-way split of politics in France between the nationalist right, Marine Le Pen, the centrist, progressive, technocratic centre like Emmanuel Macron and Sébastien Le Cornu, and the left-green bloc such as France Insoumise and the Socialist Party as well. And none of those 3 have been successfully working together, and hence that's the problem. And the centrist bloc under Macron now has a choice. Do they continue that, which is clearly unviable and is leading to constant political instability and undermining of French reputation as, a responsible public manager? Or do they swing one way or the other? They're not going to swing, I think, to the far right and Marine Le Pen, notwithstanding, or perhaps more energetically because of Elon Musk throwing his weight behind the sort of, anti-immigrant nationalist protests we saw in London just the other day. I think it's probably more likely that the centrist group will swing towards the left. So there may well be a compromise between the socialists, the more radical group, France Insoumise under Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and the sort of centrist group to do a bit of give and take, I guess, to pass some spending cut measures and perhaps to pass some revenue raising measures. And one in particular that is under active discussion is not just a revenue raising measure, it's one that is dealing with this issue of perceived inequality in society. It is a wealth tax. And it's been put forward by Zuckman, but it also perhaps reflects the ideas of a number of people over many years. And it has both a national incarnation and an international incarnation as well. Basically, this chap, Zuckman, who I think I have a picture of here, very young looking, very, he looks like the kind of guy who might have turned up to a Tommy Robinson sort of protest there to be, I don't want to offend you, Professor Zuckman, but not exactly a technocratic look there, but he is definitely proposing a wealth tax on the super rich, which is, if I just read from this France 24 news report, is proposing a minimum 2% tax on individuals with assets exceeding 100 million euros, which is, I think, that's about, I don't know, $200 million, Australian dollars. It would apply to roughly 1,800 households in France, and according to The Economist, generate up to 20 billion euros per year, and half the savings planned in the austerity budget that brought down Francois Barrou's government earlier this week. It may well be a tax measure, and despite a lot of the rhetoric from a lot of the right in politics, there's room to improve the taxation side of budgets in Western governments as well as the spending side. And it does seem to be a significant possibility. Now, Deadpool asked, how viable are these taxes? This sounds just like an amazing way to generate capital flight, and there are international proposals to introduce this tax as well. I believe President Lula from Brazil has also been behind it. I guess this is certainly an issue that will need to be considered. I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but I do believe there are some more considerations of that. I might indeed even have a look at that question, Deadpool, and maybe report back on this issue of the super rich tax next week. But it is an interesting development and a sign perhaps that maybe France has found a political leader with more political judgment, more ability to work his way through the political situation of right now, come up with some more viable compromise solutions, both politically and also pragmatically in terms of government administration. I guess on the general tax flight issue, this is always an argument that's put forward about these sorts of questions. I guess it ultimately does depend also about how, whether that is really likely to happen. And no doubt that will have been thought through in the proposals as well. I think if they are under serious consideration, that issue will be being considered. And as I said before, there is a more international consideration of it underway as well. I might even think about getting Warwick Powell on to the show and asking him about this sort of issue, if not other guests as well, because it is a huge issue, and the whole debate about taxing both wealth, but also, wealth that can leave the country easily has been a real issue. It's been a real constraint on governments in recent times, the whole capital flight issue, but I wonder if it's starting to become a diminished issue and something that more international collaboration on taxation is also starting to get under control. After all, governments actually do collaborate against international tax evasion by highly wealthy individuals and corporations as well. in the end, it might be in Elon Musk's interest to pursue these kind of things, but it's really not in the social public interest to do so, and that's why governments do collaborate on it. So that's what I kind of wanted to say about France. The next topic I wanted to talk about is just to mention a article that I've just published over at my Substack at, let me show you again, at jeffrich.substack.com. This is a bit of a bonus article with my Substack. I do a weekly post on as part of my world history tour, where I sort of I'm looking at America, China, India, Russia, and Europe as the 5 great powers or great states, major world powers of the world today in this sort of multipolar world, without getting into the details of that argument. But I've posted this article, which is partly a reflection on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting in Tianjin, or Leaders Summit in Tianjin a week or two ago. I think it was two to 3 weeks ago. I think it was 1st of September, so 16 to 17 days ago. And, of course, it was quite famous for the scene of Narendra Modi, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin clasping hands and laughing together, a sign, a symbol, a signal to the rest of the world about increased cooperation between these 3 powers. And it did make me think that, I've been thinking for a while about trying to make sense of what exactly is going on with American power these days under our friend Donald Trump, who you can see there in a AI modified image, his head placed upon the body, the highly ceremonially dressed body of Lord Curzon, who was Governor General of British India in the early 20th century, would later become Foreign Secretary of Britain and the British Empire in, I think, 1918 to 1924, some very crucial years in the British Empire. Immediately after World War One, Foreign Secretary during the Treaty of Versailles and the near war with the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, the conduct of British foreign adventurism in the Russian Civil War, the massacre at Amritsar, etc., and repression of the Indian sort of independence movement in India, etc., etc. George Curzon is one of the more notorious figures of the British Raj, and there I've placed Donald Trump's head on it, making a comparison between him and the current American Empire and the British Raj, calling it indeed the American Raj. One of the things the British Raj was notorious for, of course, was both looting India, but also maintaining its military force. The large part of the British Army or the British Imperial Forces were recruited from, garrisoned from India and the various South Asian parts of the British Raj. And what's more, they were paid for by Indian citizens, poor, often starving Indian citizens. Indeed, Lord Curzon, that was responsible for one of the more brutal famines in India around about 1900, where I think it was estimates of up to 4.5 million people died. That's right, 4.5 million people. The famines in India perhaps, need to be given a lot more attention in our historical consciousness these days. So yes, I'm making there a comparison with the American Raj. And in this article, which you can get by joining me at my Substack as a paid subscriber, just $5 US a month or $50 US a year, that's, I think, like a 20%, 20% discount there on the annual membership. I say there, it's easy to mock the hyperbole from the faded stars of the world's once hyperpower, because Van Jones from CNN was saying that after the SCO, America is in a box. It's either, he meant, it's like in a funeral box, a coffin, or he meant it was in a constrained situation. It's in a box. It's been contained by India, China, and Russia. The Tianjin Declaration itself restated well-known principles, including the UN Charter, I think, as I might have discussed last week. The actions endorsed by leaders, moreover, show that SCO will stick to its knitting, security in Asia, rather than take a fight to American shores. There's really no evidence, is there, that, the India, Russia and China want to go and invade America. They just want to, be treated decently in their own part of the world. Yet there is reason in the madness of the Western leadership panic. A fourth wave of decolonisation has surged. It may drown the American Raj in its box. So in this article, I sort of develop a bit of an idea about different waves of decolonisation. First wave, I guess, in the first 4 decades of the 20th century. The second wave, post-1945, 1947 in India and Pakistan, being one of the most the most active phase of decolonisation. A third phase where things are a little bit more ambivalent. There's almost recolonisation through globalisation, but also decolonisation of the Soviet Union, a breakup of the Soviet Union, and then finally, I guess, this more recent phase, which I argue is really going to see the push back of America's de facto colonisation of many parts of the world. That the next 20 or so years is going to be the era of the withdrawal of the American Raj from the world, the era where, if you like, the era when America, is finally decolonised, or the world is decolonised from the American empire. And I can see a couple of comments on things. Someone's Creasy saying the first wave of decolonisation was the USA and Haiti. Well, that's right. I guess, certainly America expanded its empire in the 1890s, the Philippines, Cuba, etc. But particularly the first big wave of decolonisation, many people say, and the Bolivarian revolutions in the 1820s, that's the breakup of, I guess, the Spanish Empire as well. I guess I'm referring to the first wave of decolonisation, really post-1918, with the breakup of the continental empires of the Ottomans, the Russians, and the third one, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, national self-determination. and a strong pushback from India, from the Arab world and all the others. The start of calls for freedom from the European colonial powers, which was actively resisted, of course, by many others. Of course, during the 1950s, 1960s, even into the 1970s, the European and American neo-colonial powers also significantly resisted decolonisation movements, as I've discussed in my videos on the post-Cold War world. There is a real sense in which decolonisation is amongst the principal themes of the post-1945 world. So that's really what I wanted to mention to you about my recent post, which you can get as a paid subscriber, unlock access to as a paid subscriber over at jeffrich.substack.com. And over at jeffrich.substack.com, this is where you get my world history, world tour. And I do want to just share with you a little bit about that. As you can see, through the year, I've been looking at the powers, cultures, and histories of 5 civilization states: America, China, India, Europe, and Russia. There's a whole lot of discussion and debate about the term civilization state, but we'll get into that in a minute. And you can see there the details of how you can support me over there. So I really would appreciate your support and would thank you for that. Now, let me just do something here. I just want to share one thing with you, just to give you a little bit more of a sense of what's going on with my world history tour. There you can see this is my website page at jeffrich.substack.com, and you can see there American Raj is in a box. There it is, and some of the popular posts. And you'll see there some of my recent posts. Do check it out over at jeffrich.substack.com. And this is the World Power History Tour that I've been doing. And I've just recently updated this post because I've been looking at India, China, America so far this year. They're the three big ones that I've looked at. And I've sort of grouped it here so it's easy for everyone just to check out the posts on each of those countries, depending on which ones you're most interested in. The China one, the Europe one, which is, I've just started with a post here on how the Norse myths began in Guatemala, and the India one, which is the one I've just finished, and also after Europe, I'm going to be looking at Russia and the Ruski Mir, you can see there, which include my videos. I'm loading on Substack my videos if you want to watch them without ads or without the bother of the algorithm and algorithmic interference. And then the whole series of articles I wrote on America earlier this year. On all of that. So let me just flip over here. And I'm just doing a little back work here on the live stream. So I hope everyone's enjoying the stream. Probably only go for, won't go for too long today. I hope that's okay with everyone. Now, what I wanted to really bring out for everyone was just a few highlights of what I've been writing about over at the World History World Tour, so you can think about joining. Again, every week I do a post, and paid subscribers get a little bit more of a deep dive. But every week you get a weekly book recommendation, as well as a few additional insights. And just last Friday, I also did a kind of a recap of my Indian World History Tour for all my paid subscribers, and all the paid subscribers can check out that video over at jeffrich.substack.com. And I did sort of highlight 3 particular posts that I did on the India World Tour that I found particularly interesting and fascinating. So I just want to sort of bring these out for you a little bit, and do, have a think about heading over to jeffrich.substack.com, where you can get all of this material and read it all in detail. And the first of the, I did a whole series on particularly this book. In the India World Tour, I really focused on this book. This book here by Joya Chatterjee, Shadows at Noon, the South Asian 20th century. This book won last year it won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for History, but it also won the Wolfson Prize for History, which is the most prestigious history prize in Britain. And it's an absolutely brilliant book, not just of India, but of South Asia in the 20th century, Bangladesh and Pakistan as well. And of course, until 1971, what is now Bangladesh was East Pakistan. It was part of an integrated state of Pakistan, which had 2 parts, divided, of course, by a very large amount of India. And so there are many great reflections on this chapter. It takes a sort of a very it's not a conventional history book. It's a part personal reflections and memoirs, but it's also looks at some different perspectives on history as well. It looks at the painful issues of partition, different ideas of nationalism, and the way in which the Indian or South Asian state actually worked, both in its aspirations but in its practical reality as experienced by people. It's both cursive nature, but also its ineffectual nature at times as well. But there were 3 particular pieces that I was particularly interested in, which I've just highlighted here on my discussion, which you might want to check out. One of those was about migration, and we've just seen a really. Let me just share this comment from Animal Farm. Have you considered a show on the recent African pushback on France colonisation? Maybe include the historic Western assassinations of previous African leaders, the CIA, Patrice Lumumba. Great idea. Look, I really want to do a show on sort of decolonisation, and I think that's really great. There's 2 really great ideas in there around what's happened around Africa recently, looking at that in more detail, maybe even getting a guest on the show to talk about it. But also, I think in the last year or 2, there has been a significant book published on the Congo crisis and the death of Patrice Lumumba and the involvement of the CIA and American government officials more broadly as well. So thanks very much for that suggestion, Animal Farm. I think I will take it up. Don't want to overcommit myself and do too many things, but they're really fantastic ideas. So thank you for sharing those ideas. And this whole theme of decolonisation, I just feel we should, talk more about it as well, because, in a way, you can almost conceive what's going on with, the whole push about the multipolar world. You can almost conceive, and this is partly what I did in this article about the American Raj, you can almost conceive the multipolar world as the new pushback against forms of neocolonialism. It's the reassertion of the sovereignty of these states against the encroached power of the Euro-Atlantic post-imperial powers. So let me then just, however, return to these three articles. One is about migration, and especially after the huge protests in Britain over the weekend, and a lot of silly talk I find silly talk, at least. I mean, some viewers might disagree with me, and that's totally fine. But a lot of the silly talk about civil war and, how multiculturalism is a disastrous thing. And, people need to re-galvanise around national ethnic identities. I really felt this discussion of the complex story of migration and diasporas and identity in India was absolutely worth a read, and actually bears directly on India's relationship with Australia. Now, India, the overseas born population in India, that by now the largest group is India. I think it's the last set of statistics getting on to a year's old, and India was just about to surpass Britain at that point. The second one is about food and famine. This is an absolutely brilliant article about the complex politics of food and famine in India, including a discussion about the British Raj, but also the way in which food is a social, a part of the social history of the world. It's not just what we eat, it's how we organise our societies around food as well, and in meaningful cultural ways as well. And the third one was absolutely fascinating, about how Bollywood was made. I did make a video on the channel a couple of years ago about the film RRR, Rise, Roar and Revolt, I think it is. And this book by Joya Chatterjee really totally gave me a real deep insight into the nature of Bollywood cinema. So I hope they are all good recommendations for you, and hope they give you some insights. Now, Deadpool, you're saying, I find the politics of the overseas-born diaspora to be especially insane due to the fact that they do not need to be connected to the people on the ground at all for it. Just look at the Pahalvists. I'm not quite sure what you mean by the Pahalvists. Do you mean the... maybe you could just clarify what you mean by that in a comment, Deadpool. Do you mean the Iranian people, like the ex-Iranian regime? I know what you mean about emigre politics, particularly in the dynasty from Iran. Yeah, that is true, and that form of emigre politics is really quite fascinating, isn't it? And I think it has a very powerful effect particularly American imperial politics. You think about the emigre Ukrainian um, lobby. I guess you think about the Israel lobby as well in the United States as well. There have been the Polish lobby, so the way in which elite emigres do affect national politics is really quite interesting. And as you say, not always very positive. But I think a lot of the issues explored by Joy Chatterjee in her book around migration, the ones that I'm perhaps more interested in too, is not so much the elite stuff, but more the, day-to-day lived experience, I guess, or the social history of it all, the way in which there's been enormous movements of people both from India, it was known as the coolies in India, which they're sort of indentured labour, migrant indentured labour, which more or less got established post the British abolition of the slave trade. And the near slave trade was then established as the coolie trade, and people were sent all around the world, including to the cane fields of Australia as near substitutes for slave labour in the 19th and into the 20th centuries. And there's enormous issues today with diaspora migrant labour in South Asia, in India. Indeed, diaspora migrant labour was one of the key issues informing the protests in Nepal. Approximately 30% of the Nepalese economy is from remittances sent back home, payments sent back home from people working overseas, Nepalese people working overseas, whether, like hotel staff in various countries or other sorts of roles as well. There's been a very significant Nepalese migration into a number of places around the world, quite visibly so. And that was one of the reasons the social media ban was actually quite noxious politically, because it actually was threatening people's social connections with their friends and family overseas, as well indeed as their livelihoods. So yeah, really interesting issue you raised there about the complex politics of the diaspora. There was one last thing I just quickly wanted to mention. I might just skip that one, I think. And I think I will just get to the last part of the stream, where I think last week on the stream someone suggested I do a bit of a bookshelf tour, and I won't actually get up and move the camera to things there, but if you can see right there, all those orangey books there, they're specifically the history books that I have, like it's the series from Penguin, like this one here that Dominic Leavens, they're the sort of Penguin history book series that I've collected over the years. And see that I've tried to replicate that colour in my thumbnails, and in a pretty lame attempt at branding. I hope you don't mind me sharing a little bit from behind that fourth wall there. But I have brought down just a couple of the books I've been reading, interestingly, in recent times, that I just wanted to share with you, that are from the bookshelf, to give you a little quick sort of mini tour of my bookshelf as a way of finishing up. And Chris, he says, IKEA Billy or custom carpentry. Oh, the book's on the shelf. And indeed it is IKEA Billy, I got to admit. And thanks very much, Deadpool, saying my thumbnails look clean. So, yeah, thank you very much. But yes, as Chris or Charles says, yes, it is IKEA Billy shelves there. I'm not capable of doing custom carpentry, or even indeed perhaps ordering custom carpentry. So let me just give you like these a little lightning sort of review of some of the books from the shelf. Of course, one of those is Joya Chatterjee, South Asian Century, that I've just finished, going into a deep dive in over 8 weeks on the India World History Tour at jeffrich.substack.com. And this is a brilliant book that, has won prizes. Joya Chatterjee is like South Asian woman herself, professor of South Asian studies at either Oxford or Cambridge. I can't exactly remember which one. Now sort of retired, but her book is absolutely brilliantly written, and it covers topics like different visions of nationalism, the way in which the state made claim to belonging to a certain state, the nature of citizenship, migration, household marriage and family, fasting, feasting, gluttony and starvation, consumption, caste, and the politics of food in South Asia. And finally, leisure, the 20th century style, which looks at Bollywood, but also makes you realise the way in which Indian or South Asian cinema has really not followed the path of Hollywood or American cinema or British cinema. It's followed its own path and integrated various cultural elements from South Asia. Absolutely brilliant book. And one of the things she points out in this book is partition in 1947 is an absolutely central event in South Asian experience. I mean, recently, I think August 8 or around about then, I think it was in August, it's the annual Horrors of Partition Day that's commemorated in at least India. And partition was, of course, when India and Pakistan became separate states after the British Raj left in a screaming and irresponsible hurry. And there was, all sorts of problems that emerged, both as a result of British actions as well as actions more locally as well. And she says that, if you like, when people talk about the post-1945 world in the West, in South Asia, it's you can really think more clearly about the post-1947 world. It's like a date that really is the starting point of a different kind of historical experience and a different way of actually thinking about the big story of the 20th century. The other book that I have been reading recently, again from the shelf there with I think it's coral, the colour, is this fantastic book, which is the subject of my most recent post at jeffrich.substack.com, which I write there. And this book is The Children of Ash and Elm, A History of the Vikings by Neil Price. It is absolutely brilliant book. I mean, I think the Vikings are just so, fascinating, really, aren't they? I mean, there's that show, The Vikings. There's all the myths and legends of the Vikings. They're so present in our culture in so many ways. And in a way, they also, as a result, have become, they can become just, ridiculous cliches. Think about all the Marvel versions of, Thor and all that sort of stuff. I guess they're fun to watch, but, it's not really insightful history. This book here by Neil Price, The Children of Ash and Elm, A History of the Vikings, really actually helps you get inside the mental world of the Vikings, what it was actually really like to think of yourself as a Viking. Not that the Vikings actually thought of themselves as Vikings, they actually thought of themselves as the children of Ash and Elm. And I explain what that means in my most recent post at jeffrich.substack.com. So that's an absolute definite one you want to read if you get a chance to do that. Then this is another book that I've actually just reread recently. Christopher Clark, The Sleepwalkers, How Europe Went to War in 1914. It is the story of the origins of World War One, one of the most contentious and complex and fascinating, intriguing issues, in history, really. One there has been so much written on, and Christopher Clark's book is absolutely fascinating. You might have seen the interview I did with Tariq Chiru Amar and Kevok Amassian from Syriana Analysis a couple of weeks ago on my YouTube channel. And in that, I think I brought up some of this book, the discussion of the Sleepwalkers, where one of the points he makes is that the nature of the states, the nature of the executive states in Europe before 1914 was actually highly divided. We like to think we talk about Germany or we talk about King Wilhelm II, just as today we talk about the US or the deep state or Trump as having a single purpose, being a unitary, like a individual actor who has one clear set of national interests and one clear set of purposes and a clear strategy and reasoning. But when you actually look at the nature of the history, particularly in foreign policy, which is a very complicated field where you have a lot of, relatively autonomous actors like ambassadors and foreign ministers and princes and kings, all they don't all necessarily agree. And some of the story there about a divided executive where what appears to be, a clear... There appears to be a king or a czar or an emperor who's clearly in charge, but in fact it is not so simply the case. And I think this is a real fascinating book to read as a bit of a lesson for current times and thinking about current times, and I guess using that political judgment of saying, I think it's particularly, and this is the context in which I discussed it with Tariq Chiru Amar, the whole argument about continuity of agenda in America, doesn't necessarily actually grasp how foreign policy actually works in states, either in 1914 or in whatever the current year is, 2025. A lot of the arguments about World War I are about war guilt, and a lot of those arguments about war guilt in Germany, refer to various documents that were discovered subsequently with apparent war plans and attributing a clear intent, a clear strategy, a clear continuity of agenda to one or other of the governments in pre-war Europe. That simply, when you look at the more complicated, tangled set of actual historical events, it was never, ever that simple. So, again, I think this is a great example of how history it doesn't necessarily translate into direct lessons from, well, because this happened in 1914, it means it's going to happen now. What it does is it just trains you to look at the particular messy circumstances and use your judgment about trying to work out what's going on in those situations. And then I think I said I'd do 5 books, and what have I done? 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the 4th book. And again, you can see the little coral history spine there. This is by Dominique Leven. I've read this a while ago. It's a fascinating book. After reading Christopher Clark's book on the war, I thought I would look at this some more. It really tells the story of the start of World War One from the Russian perspective, if you like. And it's fascinating because if I just read you the very first line, or first couple of lines of this book, which I think Dominique Leven published in, when did he publish it? He published it in, Deadpool asked me, I'll just say when it was published. It was published in 2015, so it's kind of, written for the anniversary of the war. Deadpool says, do you think Trump's discontinuity with the previous foreign policy could be analogous to the Kaiser Wilhelm II's dismissal of Bismarck? Interesting point. I do think there are some fascinating, again, not direct translations, but lessons to be, or inferences to be drawn from the German example. In some ways, Kaiser Wilhelm II, as an individual, sort of was reminding me of Donald Trump as I was reading the book. He, was crude, a little bit unmanageable, a little bit all over the place. He'd say one thing one day and another thing the next day. He was absolutely sure that he was in charge, but there are a lot of other people who were, focused on managing him, so he wasn't. His sentiments were not necessarily in charge, and there's been a lot of retroactive interpretation of things. So it is a thing, and yeah, I mean, I may well do something more on that and look at the discontinuity as well. I do think part of the issue with interpreting American foreign policy at the moment is, yes, the agenda is going to be similar because America is everywhere. And so if you look down through the issues of American domination of the world, it has been the same since 1945, How do we keep controlling China? How do we keep controlling Eurasia? How do we keep controlling everywhere? But the actual individual decisions that are made around all of these issues are very changeable, I think. And I think part of the difficulty of interpreting the Trump administration at the moment is the way in which this particular sovereign is only partly a sovereign, and all sovereigns are only ever really partly a sovereign, and is also, fluctuating wildly depending on the many different voices within the court of foreign policy in the White House at the moment, and within the various institutional and conflicting institutional interests, the interests of the people who want, who run the base Indo-Pacific Command, and the ones who, run European, NATO Command, the State Department and the Defense Department, all these sort of conflicting interests. So I do think there are some lessons there. But Dominique Leven, if I just return to that, tells an absolutely brilliant story from the Russian end as well, and that's really worthwhile. watching. And then the final fifth book that I wanted to bring up is this one here by Amitav Acharya. I've just finished reading this book. This is a brilliant book, really fascinating book, which let me just say, read from the blurb here, just to give you a sense of what it says. Since the dawn of the 21st century, the West has been in crisis. Social unrest, political polarisation, and the rise of other great powers threaten to unravel today's world order. Many fear that this would lead to global chaos, but the West has never had a monopoly on order. Surveying 5,000 years of global history, political scientist Amitav Acharya reveals that world order, the political architecture enabling cooperation and peace among nations, existed long before the West, and the end of Western dominance offers us the opportunity to build a better world where non-Western nations find more voice, power and prosperity. Instead of fearing the future, the West should learn from history and cooperate with the rest. It's a fabulous book. I am going to do a video on it shortly. And share some of those key ideas. To some degree, there's some of the ideas that were brought out in my discussion of Samuel Huntington's work on the clash of civilizations, and I also brought some of them out in the discussion with former Australian Foreign Minister Gareth Evans, who has a sort of a recommendation of the book. It's published. Who made a recommendation of that book as well. It is this whole issue of the West versus the rest, which I also think I discussed with Michael Rossi as well. And I do feel we need to get beyond the sort of binary sort of view about all of that and sort of think about things in a somewhat more subtle way, use more political judgment about actually understanding what the real and particular issues there are right now in this particular circumstance. All right, well, we've been going nearly an hour and a half. I hope everyone has had a good time listening to all of this. Do head over to jeffrich.substack.com, where you can join my world history tour, get my weekly book recommendations, deep dives and slow reads, and the occasional bonus article and bonus transcripts of the interviews that I do here as a paid subscriber that it is, and also be able to watch some of the interviews that I do on YouTube ad-free and algorithm interference free. You can watch my most recent interview with both Michael Pembroke and Michael Carley over there at substack.com as a paid subscriber for just $5 US a month, and $50 US a year. You don't have to buy me a coffee. Buy yourself a coffee's worth of absolutely fantastic content every month, and do, before leaving the video stream, do press that like button, share and thanks, and it is a real great way just to support my work and to boost my presence in the algorithm. It's a terribly fickle algorithm at times, the whole YouTube world. I guess I'm primarily focused on sharing my perspective on the world. I'm not really chasing YouTube fame, YouTube infamy, but certainly would like to share a more intelligent view on world affairs with more people, so that all of you can, improve your judgment about what's really going on in the world, and not lose your head in panic mode or other sorts of poor assessments of what's going on right now in the world. do check out, I'm going to be releasing check out my, could you just add your Substack link to your descriptions? It would really help with accessing it quickly. Yeah, okay, I think I will do that. I think it's there in my YouTube bio. Oh, yeah, and I think it is in the video descriptions. But I'll try to make sure it's in the top line there as well. I think in the pinned comment as well. And if you're watching, I'll try to do that, Deadpool. Thanks for that suggestion. That's really great. Okay, folks, do check out my interview with Michael Carley. I did another interview with him this morning, which will be coming out before too long on the channel. Michael Carley's written this fantastic trilogy about the 1930s failed diplomacy, Stalin's gamble, Stalin's failed alliance, and Stalin's great game. And do check out the second or the third, I think. Is it the second or the third? I think it's the second in that series that I've just done, which is about Stalin's gamble. Really, really worth interesting. In all the press of events last week with assassinations and colour revolutions and mass demonstrations and government collapses, you might have missed it, but it is a brilliant discussion of these events in the 1930s. And in the 1930s there was a search for collective security in Europe that ultimately failed. It has a kind of echo of today's events as well, so I think it's really worthwhile. So do check that out. There'll be also will be releasing a few sort of highlight segments from that over the next couple of days. And I will be back with you next week for another live stream on a Wednesday afternoon, Australian time, or on the replay whenever you choose to watch it. Thanks again so much for watching. Bye now.